On July 5th, 2026, something impossible happened. A country of 5.5 million people knocked five-time champions Brazil out of the World Cup. Their best player spent the whole tournament in a cowboy hat, buying boots in Dallas, leading strangers in a Viking rowing chant, giving interviews so deadpan you'd think he'd just bought milk. But the football isn't really the story. The country that produced that guy is. Here's the part most people get wrong. Haaland wasn't born in Norway. He was born in Leeds, England, in 2000. His father was playing for Leeds United at the time. The family moved when he was 3. Not to a postcard, to Brine. Brine sits on the Jæren coast, in the southwest corner of the country. It is flat. It is farmland. It is, by Norwegian standards, aggressively unscenic. No fjord walls, no jagged peaks, just wind, potatoes and grass, so green it looks painted on. Brine has one produce, footballers, and it doesn't treat them like a pipeline. The local club, Brine FK, plays in Norway's second tier. Kids train on the same pitches their parents did. Nobody's agent is circling. It's just what you do on a Tuesday. That's the town that raised him. Not a training academy. A farming community that happens to be good at producing central defenders and forwards nobody saw coming. So here's the actual question worth asking. What does a country that produces someone like that, someone who can dominate a sport, this completely and shrug about it, actually look like? Because Brine isn't an answer. Brine is just where the story starts. The player's done his job. Now it's the country's turn. Here's the scale of it. A coastline that, measured fjord by fjord, inlet by inlet, island by island, stretches over 29,000 kilometers, almost 3/4 of the way around the planet. A population smaller than Singapore's. So what's actually out there? Start with Sognefjord, 205 kilometers long, 1,308 meters deep at its lowest point. The deepest fjord on Earth. Lay the Empire State Building on its side at the bottom, and the top would still sit 300 meters underwater. 40 separate ice ages carved it. Each one ground a glacier up to 3 kilometers thick down the same valley, over and over, for hundreds of thousands of years. The bedrock underneath is 2 billion years old, older than oxygen in the atmosphere itself. And into the walls of that 2 billion year old rock, people built farms. Some are reachable only by boat, some only by ladders bolted into the cliff. There used to be a tradition on the most exposed farms of tying small children to ropes during the day, so they wouldn't fall into the fjord while their parents worked the slope. The people who lived like that didn't think of themselves as brave. They thought of themselves as Norwegian. Above it all, in slow circles, hangs the largest bird of prey in Europe. The white-tailed sea eagle has a wingspan wider than a man is tall. By the 1960s, poison and hunting had pushed them to fewer than 200 breeding pairs on the entire mainland. Norway made killing one a crime in 1968. Today there are over 4,000 pairs. No monument, no announcement. They just came back because the country decided they should. Now go north to Noway Fjord. At its narrowest point, it's 400 meters wide, one of the tightest fjords in the world. Walls so close you could believe you're inside a hallway, carved by a giant, not an ice sheet. 20,000 years of glacial carving did this. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and less than 10% of visitors to Norway ever actually come here. Farms still cling to slopes along its edges. Some families have worked the same terraces for centuries. No roads reach them, just water. A narrow mountain track and a kind of patience with isolation that runs all the way through Norwegian life. Two fjords, one built to be the deepest wound in the Earth's surface, one built to barely let the light in, both still farmed, both still lived in. Nobody tying a rope around a toddler on a cliff edge thinks of it as impressive. They just think of it as Tuesday. Somewhere, a 6'5" striker is currently insisting the goalkeeper deserves more credit than he does. Same instinct, different generation. First, Trolltunga, troll's tongue. A slab of rock jutting 700 meters straight out, over Lake Ringedal's Vatnet, hanging in open air like it forgot to fall. The last ice age carved it. 10,000 years ago, a leftover ledge from a glacier that used to fill the whole valley. Local folklore says it's exactly what it looks like. A platform trolls once used to fish from before sunlight turned them to stone. Getting there isn't casual. It's a full-day hike, 10 hours round trip for most people, across exposed plateau with no shelter and weather that can turn in 20 minutes. And still, up to 100,000 people make that hike every single year, just to stand at the edge of a tongue of rock, with nothing under it but 400 meters of air. Then there's Prekstolen, Pulpit Rock, a flat-topped cliff rising 600 meters straight up from the Lyse Fjord below, carved by the same slow violence of ice, frost splitting the rock apart, one winter at a time for 10,000 years. The summit is flat enough to hold a few hundred people at once, and on a summer afternoon, it usually does. No railing, no barrier, just 600 meters of nothing between the edge of your shoe and the fjord. It's also somehow a wedding venue. Norwegians get married up there. Somebody carries a cake up a 3.5-hour trail because the view was worth more than convenience. And wedged between two cliff faces, near that same fjord, sits Kjerakbolten, a 5-ton boulder dropped by a glacier 12,000 years ago, jammed in a gap with a 1,000-meter drop directly beneath it. People climb out and stand on it for a photo. On purpose, 3 formations, carved by the same ice in the same country, within a few hours' drive of each other. None of them fenced off, none of them apologized for, just handed to anyone willing to make the walk. So how do you build a life around scenery like that? Cliffs with no railings, farms with no roads, a landscape that could kill you if you stopped paying attention for a second. What does that do to a people? Here's where the numbers stop being scenery and start being strange. Norway sits on the largest pile of money any country has ever collectively owned. Over $2 trillion held in a sovereign wealth fund built from oil found almost by accident in 1969, split evenly across every citizen. That's roughly $390,000 each, man, woman, and child. And the country that owns all of it has a cultural rule that says, don't act like it. It's called janteloven, written into a 1933 novel, quietly absorbed by everyone. The short version: you are not to think you're special, not better, not smarter, not above anyone else in the room. It's not a suggestion. It's enforced by the culture itself. The Norwegian king rides the Oslo subway. Every citizen's income and net worth is published online. Anyone can look up anyone. A recent prime minister bicycled to work. And when the country appointed a hedge fund manager to run that $2 trillion fund in 2020, the appointment nearly collapsed. Not because he wasn't qualified, but because he was, by Norwegian standards, too visibly rich to be trusted with public money. His solution was to give most of his personal fortune away. He still bikes to the office. The fund itself follows the same logic. It's legally barred from investing a single krone inside Norway, so the wealth can't distort its own economy. The government isn't allowed, by ironclad political convention, not even law, to spend more than a small slice of it in any given year. The money belongs to a generation that hasn't been born yet. It shows up in smaller ways too. The country maintains over 500 mountain cabins for hikers. Simple wooden huts, unlocked, running entirely on trust. You stay the night, you leave payment in a cash box on the wall. In a nation with $2 trillion in savings, the cabins aren't built of marble. They have outhouses, not because Norway can't afford better, because it's decided better. In this case means simpler. Offices work the same way. Flat hierarchies. A 37.5-hour work week. 5 weeks of mandatory vacation that people actually take. Managers you can walk up to. No one performing importance. Because performing importance is exactly what the culture was built to prevent. Most rich countries that strike oil don't do this. They build palaces. They inflate. They collapse under their own excess a generation later. Norway built a rule instead and then, mostly, kept it. It's the same instinct that had the country's best player in a generation, fresh off eliminating 5-time champions Brazil, standing in a subway station, leading strangers in a Viking rowing chant, instead of celebrating alone. Nobody in that station felt small standing next to him. That's the whole point. High in Norway's mountain plateaus lives an animal built entirely for cold. The Arctic fox has the warmest coat of any mammal on Earth. In winter it turns pure white, fur growing even on the bottom of its paws, turning its feet into built-in snowshoes. By the early 2000s, fur trapping, climate change, and competition from the larger red fox had pushed the mainland population below 50 animals. In 2005, Norway started a quiet, captive breeding program. Pups raised in remote enclosures, released back into the wild, almost no press coverage. Today there are over 300 foxes back in the mountains. Not a huge number. Enough. Now go further north and that fox will ever wander. Past the Arctic Circle, past Tromsø, sits Longyearbyen, the northernmost town on Earth, 1,300 kilometers from the North Pole. Here, polar bears outnumber people. Roughly 3,000 bears to about 2,000 residents. It's technically illegal to leave town without a rifle, and illegal to own a dog, so as not to disturb the bears that already outnumber you. For 2 months of the year, the sun never rises here at all. For 2 months in summer, it never sets. Built into a mountainside nearby is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a frozen concrete tunnel holding over 1 million seed varieties from almost every country on Earth, designed specifically to survive a global catastrophe nobody in Longyearbyen ever expects to see. Norway didn't build it for itself. It built it in case everyone else needs it. Between the fox and the vault is the same idea, just at different scales. A 300-strong population of animals nobody outside Norway has heard of, saved without fanfare. A backup copy of the entire world's food supply, built quietly into permafrost, insured against a disaster that may never come. Nobody put a plaque on either one. Norway just decided both were worth doing and did them. Zoom back out, past the fox, past the vault, past the fjords and the cliffs with no railings. What you're left with is a small country that was handed almost everything: oil, scenery, a generational athlete, and built its entire identity around not making a big deal out of any of it. That's not an accident of geography. That's a choice made over and over for 50 years. Which brings us back to July 5th, 2026. A country of 5.5 million people, sitting on $2 trillion, just knocked 5-time champions Brazil out of the World Cup. And the man who did it spent the whole tournament buying cowboy boots and singing with strangers in a subway station. That's not a contradiction. That's the whole country in one afternoon. Norway may or may not win this World Cup. Their quarterfinal is still ahead of them. It doesn't really matter to them. Winning was never supposed to be the point. So here's the question worth sitting with. What happens to a country like that if it actually wins?